Close your eyes now, and let your breathing soften. Tonight, we're traveling back, far back, to a world where certain gifts were simply given. No coins exchanged. No contracts signed. Just custom. Just tradition. Imagine walking through a medieval village at dusk. The air smells of wood smoke and wet earth. Somewhere, a cow lows softly. Somewhere else, bread cools on a windowsill. And all around you, people are taking things. Not stealing. Just taking. Because some things, in that world, belong to everyone. Tonight, we'll walk together through that vanished commons, and discover what happened when one person decided to close the gate. Let your shoulders drop. Let the modern world fade. We're going back, to when the forest belonged to everyone, and the water flowed freely, and the very air itself seemed more generous than it is today. Let's begin. Picture yourself waking before dawn in a small timber cottage. The floor beneath you is packed earth, cool and slightly damp. You rise slowly, pulling on a rough woolen tunic that smells faintly of smoke and yesterday's work. Outside, the sky is just beginning to pale, that soft, uncertain gray that comes before true sunrise. You take a basket from its peg by the door. Woven willow. Your grandmother made it. And you walk, slowly, toward the forest. This forest is not owned. Not exactly. Oh, there's a lord who claims the land, certainly. His manor house sits on the hill, and his men patrol the larger game trails. But the forest itself? The undergrowth, the deadwood, the mushrooms and berries and fallen branches? Those belong to the custom. To the commons. To everyone who has always walked here. You are not stealing when you gather sticks for your fire. This is your right. It has always been your right. Your parents did this. Their parents did this. Back and back, through generations whose names have been forgotten but whose footpaths still wind through the bracken. The practice has a name, Estover. The right to gather wood from common land. It's not written in any charter you can read. Most villagers cannot read anyway. But it is written in the rhythm of seasons, in the collective memory of the village, in the unspoken agreement that has held society together since before anyone can remember. You bend and pick up a branch. Oak. Good and dry. It will burn slow and steady. You add it to your basket. Then another. The forest floor is generous this morning. A windstorm passed through 3 nights ago, and the ground is scattered with gifts. Around you, other villagers are doing the same. Old Thomas, bent nearly double, gathering kindling. Young Margaret with her 2 small children, teaching them which mushrooms are safe. The blacksmith's wife, pulling bark from a fallen birch, she'll use it to line her root cellar. No one speaks much. It's too early, and the work is too familiar. But there's a comfort in the presence of others. You are not alone in your need. You are not alone in your claim to this place. The light grows softer now, filtering through the canopy in long, dusty beams. Birds begin their tentative morning songs. A deer moves somewhere in the deeper woods. You hear the crack of a twig, then silence. The air is cool and smells of moss and decomposing leaves and the secret, earthy breath of the forest itself. You fill your basket slowly. There is no rush. The day is long, and the forest will still be here tomorrow. This is not the frantic gathering of scarcity. This is the steady, rhythmic collection of a people who know the land will provide, because it always has. Estover. The right to gather. A word most modern people have never heard, for a practice most modern people cannot imagine. But here, in this misty medieval morning, it is as natural as breathing. As expected as sunrise. You pause for a moment, your basket half full, and look up through the trees. The sky is lighter now, pale blue beginning to show between the leaves. You can see your breath in the cool air. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker drums against the hollow tree, the sound echoing softly through the stillness. This forest is not yours. But it is not yours either. It exists in that strange, communal space that the medieval world understood instinctively, land that belongs to the custom, to the collective, to the web of mutual rights and responsibilities that holds a community together. You hoist your basket and begin the walk home. Your cottage is waiting. Your hearth is cold and needs these sticks. And when the fire is lit, and the warmth begins to spread, you will not think about ownership or property rights or the complicated legal frameworks that will one day govern every inch of forest floor. You will simply be warm. And outside, the forest will remain, standing in the mist, waiting for the next villager to walk its paths, and take what they need, as people have always done. The basket creaks softly as you walk. Your footsteps make almost no sound on the damp earth. And somewhere behind you, deeper in the trees, the forest breathes and settles and continues its ancient, patient work of simply being. The path from the forest leads you past the mill. You can hear it before you see it, the steady, rhythmic splash and creak of the water wheel turning in the stream. It's a sound that never stops, day or night, as long as the water flows. Which it always does. The stream belongs to everyone. Like the forest, like the air itself, the water that runs through the village has never been owned by any one person. It flows from the hills through the commons, past the mill and the tannery and the washing stones, and eventually away into the wider river beyond. This water is used, constantly. Used and reused and used again, in a chain of purposes that everyone understands. First, it turns the mill wheel. The miller, a broad-shouldered man named Edmund, who always smells faintly of flour, has built his wheel where the current runs strongest. The lord of the manor granted him the right to build here, yes? But the water itself? That cannot be granted because it cannot be owned. It simply flows. The wheel turns. The grindstones inside the mill turn with it. And the villagers bring their grain to be ground into flour. Edmund takes a portion as payment. This too is custom. 1/16 of every sack measured carefully. But the water that powers his wheel? That costs nothing. That is free. You pause on the wooden bridge and watch the wheel turning. Splash. Creak. Splash. Creak. The rhythm is hypnotic. Water pours over the paddles in sheets of silver, falls into the stream below, and continues its journey. The same water that turned the wheel 10 seconds ago is already flowing past the mill, downstream, toward its next purpose. Below the mill, a group of women are washing clothes on the flat rocks at the stream's edge. They kneel in the shallow water, scrubbing wool and linen against the stones, wringing out the excess, laying everything on the grass to dry. The cold water makes their hands red and chapped, but the stream is perfect for this work, clear and fast-moving, carrying away the dirt and soap without stagnating. The women talk as they work. Quiet conversation about children and weather, and the upcoming saint's day. Their voices blend with the sound of splashing water and the distant creaking of the mill wheel. No one has asked permission to use this water. No one needs to. This is common water, and washing clothes is common work. Downstream from the women, past the bend where willow trees trail their fingers in the current, is the tannery. You can smell it from here, the sharp, acrid scent of urine and oak bark and animal hides being cured. The tanner, William, is ankle-deep in the stream, rinsing a half-processed cowhide. The water here runs brown with tannins and waste, but it keeps flowing, and by the time it reaches the next village downstream, the current will have cleaned it again. Mostly. This is how the medieval world works. Resources flow. They are used and passed on and used again. Nothing is hoarded because nothing can be hoarded. Water, air, sunlight, the fruit on common trees. These things exist in motion, in circulation, in the perpetual gift-giving of the natural world. You continue across the bridge, your basket of firewood balanced on your hip. The sound of the mill wheel fades slowly behind you. Splash. Creak. Splash. Creak. It will still be turning tonight when you fall asleep. It will still be turning tomorrow morning when you wake. There is something deeply comforting about this. The constancy. The reliability. The knowledge that some things simply are, that the stream will flow and the wheel will turn and the water will be there, free and available, for whoever needs it. Of course, there are rules. Unwritten rules, but rules nonetheless. You cannot dam the stream and prevent it from flowing to your neighbors. You cannot foul it so badly that it becomes unusable for those downstream. You cannot take so much that others go without. These rules are enforced not by law, exactly, but by social pressure, by reputation, by the knowledge that you must live alongside these people for the rest of your life, and their children must live alongside your children, and if you violate the commons, you will be remembered. And not kindly. The stream glints in the morning sun as you walk away. Silver and brown and endlessly moving. Behind you, the mill wheel continues its work. Before you, the village wakes slowly, smoke beginning to rise from cottage chimneys, a dog barking somewhere, the sound of a baby crying and being soothed. And through it all, the water flows. Free as it has always been. Free as it will always be. Or so everyone believes. Autumn arrives slowly. The air grows cooler. The light slants differently through your cottage window. And in the fields surrounding the village, the grain stands tall and golden, ready for harvest. These fields are not commons. They belong to the Lord, worked by villagers who owe him labor and a portion of the crop. But even here, in these owned and managed spaces, there are customs older than any charter. Rights that belong to the poorest among you. The right to glean. The harvest begins on a morning very much like this one. You can hear the workers in the fields, the rhythmic swish of scythes cutting through wheat, the calls of the foreman keeping everyone in line, the songs they sing to pace their work. Strong backs bend and rise, bend and rise. The grain falls in neat rows. The morning stretches into afternoon. You do not work the harvest this year. Your back is not what it was. Your hands shake with age or illness, it hardly matters which. You cannot swing a scythe or bind the heavy sheaves. But you can walk. And you can bend. And you have a basket. So you wait. The law, unwritten but absolute, says that the harvesters must finish a field completely before the gleaners can enter. This is to prevent theft, yes. But also to maintain order. To keep the distinction clear between the harvest proper and what comes after. You wait at the edge of the field with a dozen others. Old people mostly. Children too young to work. A widow with 3 small sons. A man whose arm was crushed years ago and never healed straight. The people who fall through the cracks. The people for whom the commons, in all its forms, is not a convenience but a lifeline. The sun climbs higher. The harvesters work their way across the field. Finally, as afternoon begins to deepen toward evening, the foreman raises his hand. The last sheaf is bound. The last row is cleared. The field is harvested. And now, it is yours. You walk slowly into the stubble, your basket in hand. The ground is rough beneath your feet, cut stalks and dirt, and the scattered chaff of threshing. But here and there, gleaming in the slanted light, are individual grains of wheat. Kernels dropped during the harvest. Stalks that were missed or broken or too small to bother with. You bend and pick them up. One at a time. Slowly. This is gleaning. The right of the poor to gather what remains after the harvest. It is mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Ruth, where the foreign widow gleans in the fields of Boaz and survives the winter on what she finds. It is mentioned in the Talmud. It is woven into the legal codes of ancient Rome. And here, in this medieval field, it continues. Not because anyone has decided to be charitable, but because this is simply how things are done. How things have always been done. The work is hard. Your back aches. Your knees complain. But the basket slowly fills with grain, not much, but enough. Enough to grind into flour. Enough to bake into bread. Enough to keep hunger at arm's length for another few days. Around you, Others are gleaning too. The widow's children fan out across the stubble, their small hands quick and their eyes sharp. The old man with the broken arm uses a stick to hook stalks closer. Everyone works in silence, focused and deliberate. The light continues to change. Golden. Then amber. Then that particular shade of orange that only exists at harvest time, when the dust hangs in the air and the sun is low and the whole world seems balanced on the edge between abundance and scarcity. No one rushes you. The field is yours until dark. Until you have gathered all you can find. Until your basket is full or your back finally gives out, whichever comes first. This is not charity. This is law, or something older than law. This is the acknowledgement that a society which does not care for its weakest members is not a society worth maintaining. That some portion of every harvest must be left for those who cannot harvest themselves. You straighten slowly, one hand on your lower back. Your basket is half full. Good enough. More than you hoped for. You begin the slow walk home, leaving the field to those who are still searching. Behind you, the stubble rustles softly in the evening breeze. The harvesters have moved on to the next field. Tomorrow, they will work there. And the day after, you will glean there too. The cycle continues. Season after season. Year after year. And at the edge of the field, a rabbit emerges from its burrow, sniffing at the scattered grain, taking its share too. Your cottage, like most cottages, does not have an oven. There is a hearth, yes, a fire pit in the center of the room where you cook porridge and boil water and roast the occasional bit of meat. But an oven requires stone and mortar, careful construction, and most importantly, far more fuel than any one household can reasonably gather. So the village shares an oven. It stands at the center of the settlement, in a small stone building with a thick thatched roof. The oven itself is massive, built of river stones and clay, with an arched opening and a chimney that always seems to be smoking. On baking days, which come twice each week, the oven is lit before dawn and kept burning until every household has had their turn. You arrive mid-morning, carrying your dough in a wooden bowl covered with cloth. The dough is simple. Flour from gleaned grain, water from the stream, a pinch of salt, and a bit of starter saved from last week's batch. It rose overnight beside your hearth, and now it is ready to become bread. There is a queue. Of course there is a queue. Baking day is always busy. You take your place behind Marjorie the dairymaid and in front of John the carpenter's eldest daughter. No one complains about waiting. This is simply part of the rhythm. Part of the work. The baker, appointed by the village, paid in loaves rather than coin, manages the oven with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this 1,000 times. He uses a long wooden peel to slide loaves in and out of the heat, checking each one, rotating them to ensure even baking, calling out names when someone's bread is ready. The heat radiating from the oven is extraordinary. Even standing several feet away, you can feel it on your face and hands. In winter, people linger near the oven just to warm themselves. In summer, everyone stands as far back as courtesy allows. The smell, though. The smell is glorious. Warm bread. Yeast and wheat and the faint, caramelized sweetness of crust turning golden. It fills the air around the oven, thick and comforting. It is the smell of survival. The smell of community. The smell of the commons working exactly as it should. You use this oven for free. Well, not exactly free. There is a customary payment, one small loaf from every baking, given to the baker for his work and his knowledge. But you pay nothing for the oven itself. Nothing for the fuel. Nothing for the space or the structure or the years of communal maintenance that keep it standing. It is a common oven. Built by the village, for the village, maintained by collective effort and collective interest. This system exists because individual ovens make no sense. They would require too much wood, far more than Estover rights could sustainably provide. They would require too much labor, someone would need to tend each fire constantly. And they would require too much knowledge, Baking is a skill, and not everyone has it. So the village pools its resources, builds one good oven, employs one skilled baker, and everyone benefits. Your turn comes. The baker nods at you, and you step forward, lifting your bowl. He takes the dough carefully, respectfully, and shapes it with quick, practiced hands. Then he slides it onto the peel and, in one smooth motion, deposits it into the oven's heart. "An hour," he says. "Maybe less." You nod and step aside, making room for John's daughter and her own loaves. You sit on a bench near the oven and wait. Others are waiting too. Quiet conversations unfold. News is exchanged. Someone mentions that the Lord's steward was seen riding toward the next village yesterday. On what business, no one knows. Someone else says their cow is sick and asks if anyone has spare feverfew. This is what the commons creates. Not just shared resources, but shared time. Shared space. The slow, steady weaving of community through repeated encounters, through waiting together, through the mutual vulnerability of depending on the same oven, the same stream, the same forest. Eventually, the baker calls your name. You rise and approach. He uses the peel to extract your loaf, round and golden and still steaming, and places it gently in your basket. It is perfect. You tear off the customary piece, the baker's share, and hand it to him. He accepts it with a nod. No words are needed. This transaction has occurred 10,000 times before and will occur 10,000 times again. You walk home slowly, cradling the warm bread. The afternoon light is soft and golden. Somewhere, a cow lows. Somewhere else, children laugh. And behind you, the oven keeps burning, baking loaf after loaf, feeding the village, one household at a time. Not everything is common. Not everything is free. The forest where you gather sticks is common land, yes. But beyond it, deeper, darker, stretching for miles in every direction, lies the Lord's forest. His private hunting grounds. And here, the rules are very, very different. You can walk through the Lord's forest. That is permitted. You can follow the paths that have always existed, the tracks worn smooth by generations of travelers moving between villages. But you cannot take anything. Not a branch. Not a mushroom. And certainly not a deer. The deer belong to the Lord. So do the boar. So do the rabbits and partridges and even the fish in the deeper streams that run through his land. This is not custom. This is law. Forest law. Enforced by foresters who patrol the woods and by courts that meet 4 times a year to try offenders. The punishment for poaching is severe. A deer killed illegally might cost you a hand. A second offense might cost your eyes. The law is designed not just to punish but to terrify. To make the very thought of taking what belongs to the Lord too frightening to contemplate. And yet, people poach anyway. You know this because you are not naive. You have lived in this village your entire life. You know that William the tanner's family ate suspiciously well last winter, and you know that the stew they shared with their neighbors tasted distinctly of venison. You know that Hugh, who works the Lord's stables, sometimes comes home with rabbits that he claims to have trapped on common land, though everyone knows the best rabbit warrens are deep in the forbidden woods. The commons and the private forest exist side by side, separated by invisible lines that everyone learns to recognize. A certain tree marks the boundary. A certain stream. You learn where you can go, and where you cannot. You learn it the way you learn which mushrooms are poisonous, through stories and warnings and the occasional terrible example. There is a man in the next village who lost his right hand for killing a doe. He still lives there. You've seen him at the market. He manages surprisingly well with just his left hand, and people are kind to him, bringing him work, helping with tasks he cannot do alone. But his stump is a constant reminder. A warning carved in flesh. The tension between the commons and the private is where the medieval world lives. On one hand, the old customs that say certain things belong to everyone. On the other, the newer laws that say certain things belong to the powerful, and the rest of you exist only at their pleasure. Most days you don't think about this. Most days you gather your sticks from the common woods and feel grateful for what you have. But sometimes, late at night, when the fire is low and your stomach is empty, you wonder about those deer. About how many there are, running free through the Lord's forest. About how much meat they carry. About how little difference one deer would make to a man who owns thousands of acres, but how much difference it would make to you. But you do not poach. The risk is too great. And besides, there is a moral weight to it. The Lord protects the village in His way. His men-at-arms keep bandits at bay. His courts settle disputes. In the great feudal bargain, you owe Him loyalty and labor, and He owes you protection. Or so the theory goes. Still, you understand the poachers. You understand the calculation they make, hunger against fear, family against law. You understand that for some people, in some winters, the commons is not enough. That stover and gleaning in the shared oven, generous as they are, cannot always fill every belly or warm every hearth. And so the poaching continues. Quietly. In the dark. Men slipping into the forbidden woods at night, setting snares, taking risks that make your blood run cold just thinking about them. You've never asked William directly if that was venison. You've never asked Hugh where his rabbits really came from. These are questions the community has agreed, silently, not to ask. Because knowing is dangerous. Because testimony in a forest court can mean the difference between a neighbor keeping their hand or losing it. The evening settles around your cottage. Your fire burns low. Outside, the forest, both the common forest and the forbidden one, grows dark and still. Somewhere in that darkness, perhaps, a deer moves through the undergrowth. Unaware of the lines drawn around it. Unaware that its life is claimed by a man it has never seen. And somewhere else, perhaps, a poacher watches that deer, and weighs his hunger against his hands. The forest keeps its secrets. And you close your eyes, and are grateful for the commons you have. It begins with a fence. Not a large fence. Not at first. Just a low stone wall, built over the course of a few weeks along the eastern edge of the common pasture. The pasture where the village has always grazed its animals, cows and sheep and the occasional goat, all mingling together, all belonging to different families but sharing the same grass. The man building the wall is Sir Robert. Not the old lord, he died last winter, but his son. Young. Educated in London. Full of new ideas about property and profit and efficiency. He says the wall is an improvement. He says it will help manage the land better. He says a lot of things that sound reasonable when he says them in his calm, educated voice. But the fence is not an improvement. The fence is an ending. You stand at the edge of the common and watch the wall grow, stone by stone. Other villagers stand with you. No one speaks much. There is a growing dread, a sense that something fundamental is shifting, though no one can quite articulate what. When the wall is finished, Sir Robert announces his intention. The enclosed land, about 30 acres of the common pasture, will now be his private property. He will graze his own sheep there. Improve the grass. Perhaps plant wheat. But where will our animals graze? Someone asks. On the remaining common land, Sir Robert says smoothly. There's plenty of space. This is not true. There is not plenty of space. The commons worked because they were large enough to support the whole village's needs without overgrazing. Remove 30 acres, and the balance collapses. The remaining land cannot support the same number of animals. Something will have to give. Someone, you don't see who, mutters that this is theft. Sir Robert's expression hardens. Theft? He repeats. I am enclosing my own land. Land that belongs to my family by ancient right. The commons exist at my sufferance, not by your right. This is the argument. The new argument. The argument that will, over the next few centuries, destroy the commons entirely. Is the common land really common? Or does it belong to the Lord, who simply permits the villagers to use it? The answer depends on who you ask. To the villagers, the commons are a right, ancient, inalienable, proven by generations of use. To Sir Robert and men like him, the commons are a privilege, granted by the landowner and revocable at will. There is no resolution to this argument. Not really. It will be fought in courts and fields and pamphlets for the next 300 years. But here in this village, on this afternoon, the argument is already over. Sir Robert has the power. The villagers do not. The wall stands. The land is enclosed. Over the following months, the consequences unfold slowly. Families who own several cows must sell one or two, there isn't enough common pasture to feed them all. Families who relied on gleaning find that Sir Robert has enclosed the best harvesting fields as well. Families who gathered sticks find that the enclosed land included the most accessible part of the forest. The commons shrinks. And with it, the margin of survival shrinks too. You notice it in small ways. In the widow down the lane who used to keep 3 chickens but now keeps only 1. In the way people are quieter at the common oven, more anxious, less willing to share news or help. In the slow, grinding increase of hunger, not starvation, not yet, but the constant, nagging awareness that there is less. Less for everyone. Some families leave. They pack what they can carry and walk to other villages, other towns, hoping to find commons that are not yet enclosed. Some stay and adapt, taking work in Sir Robert's fields, becoming laborers rather than commoners, trading independence for wages. And some resist. Not loudly. Not violently. But in small, persistent ways. Sheep mysteriously appear on the enclosed land at night, grazing Sir Robert's improved grass. Fences develop gaps that no one will admit to creating. Tools go missing from the enclosure work site. Sir Robert hires men to guard his wall. The resistance continues anyway. You do not participate in this resistance. You are too old, too tired, too aware of what happens to people who cross the powerful. But you understand it. You understand the fury that drives someone to risk punishment for the sake of grazing a single sheep on land that, just months ago, was theirs by right. The evening sun casts long shadows across the enclosed field. The wall runs straight and true, a dark line against the grass. Beyond it, the remaining common land looks smaller now. More crowded. And you think, this is how it ends. Not with a war. Not with a proclamation. Just with a wall. Just with one man deciding that what was everyone's, is now his. The shadows lengthen. The air cools. And somewhere, a sheep bleats softly, on the wrong side of the fence. The mill changes too. It happens gradually. So gradually that at first, you don't quite notice. But one day you arrive with your grain, expecting to have it ground as always, and the miller, Edmund's son now, Edmund himself having died 2 winters past, informs you of a new rule. You must use this mill. Only this mill. No other. You stare at him. But I've always... Lord's orders, the young miller says. He doesn't look happy about it either. All grain grown on his land must be ground at his mill. No hand grinding. No traveling to the next village. Here. Only here. This is new. This is wrong. The mill was always Edmund's business, yes. He charged for the service, yes. But you had a choice. You could grind your grain by hand if you had the time and strength. You could walk to the next village's mill if their prices were better. You could negotiate, complain, take your business elsewhere if Edmund cheated you on the measure. Not anymore. Sir Robert has declared the mill a monopoly. A banality, in the language of the time, a facility that all residents are required to use, at prices set by the Lord, with no alternative permitted. The young miller charges more than his father did. 1/12 of every sack now, instead of 1/16. And there's nothing you can do about it. Complain, and you'll be told that the Lord has expenses. That the mill requires maintenance. That this is the way things are done now. You pay. Everyone pays. What choice is there? But the cost is more than grain. The cost is also time. With everyone forced to use the same mill, the queues grow longer. You arrive at dawn and wait until midday. Your grain sits in the damp, attracting mice. The young miller, overwhelmed by demand, grows careless. Sometimes the flour is unevenly ground. Sometimes you're certain he's taken more than his 1/12th share, but proving it is impossible. The mill, which was once a service, has become a tax. And like all taxes, it is resented. You remember when the mill was simply part of the commons, not owned by everyone, exactly, but available to everyone, running on water that belonged to everyone, grinding grain with reasonable charges that were negotiated by custom rather than imposed by decree. That mill is gone. This new arrangement is called, seigneurial rights, the rights of the Lord. The right to force you to use his mill, his oven, his wine press. The right to charge what he likes and forbid alternatives. It is legal. It is enforceable. And it is spreading. The common oven will be next. You can feel it coming. Already there is talk that Sir Robert is displeased with the current arrangement. That he believes the village should pay for the privilege of using an oven on his land. That he might build his own oven and require everyone to use it, for a fee, of course. A fee significantly higher than the customary loaf given to the village baker. You sit outside your cottage in the late afternoon, your flour finally ground and paid for. The bag feels lighter than it should. You're not sure if that's because the miller took more than his share or simply because you're tired and the walk home was long. Around you, the village is quiet. Too quiet. The ease and generosity that once characterized daily life, the sense that some things simply flowed, freely and naturally, like water, is fading. In its place is a new cautiousness. A new calculation. How much will this cost? How long will I wait? Can I afford to survive? The commons is dying. Not all at once. Not everywhere. But here, in this village, under Sir Robert's modern management, it is shrinking day by day. Fenced. Monopolized. Transformed from a shared inheritance into a series of transactions, each one costing a little more than the last. You think about the mill wheel, still turning in the stream. Still powered by free water. Still doing the same work it has always done. But now the benefits flow in only one direction, upward, to Sir Robert, while everyone else pays. The sun sets slowly. The light turns soft and orange. Somewhere in the village, a baby cries. Somewhere else, a dog barks. And at the mill, the wheel keeps turning. Splash. Creak. Splash. Creak. But the sound is different now. Heavier. Like the grinding of something more than grain. Like the grinding away of a world that once believed some things, some essential things, should simply be free. The wheel turns. The water flows. And you sit, and rest, and remember when things were different. Your grandmother used to tell stories. You wish you had listened more carefully. She would sit by the fire on winter evenings, this was decades ago now, when you were still a child, and speak about the time before. The time when the commons were wider. When the forests seemed endless. When the idea of a man owning water or air would have been laughable. It was all gift, she would say. The world was a gift, and we were meant to share it. You remember her hands as she spoke. Gnarled with age and work, always moving, spinning wool, mending, gesturing to emphasize a point. She had lived through changes you were only beginning to understand. She had seen the first enclosures in the neighboring villages. She had watched the commons shrink. "They'll take it all," she said once, when you were 12 or 13. "Bit by bit. They'll put walls around everything. Even the light, if they could. And then they'll charge us to live in our own world." You hadn't understood then. The warning seemed abstract, exaggerated the way old people's warnings often did. But you understand now. Now you are the old one. Now you sit by your own fire and watch your own grandchildren play on the floor. And you wonder what you should tell them. What warnings you should pass on. What memories you should preserve of a world that is already half gone. Should you tell them about the forest that once stretched twice as far? About the stream that everyone used freely, before Sir Robert's son began talking about water rights? About the fields where gleaning was a certainty, not a privilege grudgingly granted? Should you tell them about the common oven that baked everyone's bread, before it was replaced by the Lord's oven with its mandatory fees? About the pastures where animals grazed together, before the walls went up and grazing became a calculated expense? Or will these stories just make them sad? Will they mourn for something they never knew? For a world that might sound like fantasy to children who have only ever known enclosure and monopoly and the slow, steady privatization of everything that was once shared? You decide to tell them anyway. One evening, when the fire is low and the children are quiet, you begin. You tell them about Estover, the right to gather wood from common land. You can see their faces scrunch in confusion. But whose wood was it? They ask. Everyone's, you say. And no one's. It was just there. For whoever needed it. They don't quite understand. How could they? They have grown up in a world where everything belongs to someone. Where every resource has an owner and every use has a price. But you persist. You tell them about the mill that once ground grain for a reasonable fee, set by custom and negotiation. About the stream that flowed freely through everyone's lives. About gleaning. About the common pastures. You tell them about the old idea, ancient as anything, that some things are too essential to be owned. That water and air and sunlight and the wild fruits of the earth are gifts, not commodities. That a society which forgets this becomes something hard and cold and ultimately unsustainable. Your eldest grandchild, a girl of 9 with your grandmother's eyes, asks, "Will it ever go back to how it was?" You don't know how to answer that. Honestly, you don't believe it will. The momentum is all in one direction. More enclosures. More monopolies. More private property carved out of what was once commons. The logic of ownership is too compelling, too profitable, too aligned with power to be reversed. But you also know that humans are strange and stubborn. That old ideas have a way of surviving in the margins, in stories, in the collective memory of people who refuse to forget. That sometimes, not in your lifetime, but perhaps in some distant future, people look back at what was lost and decide to try again. Maybe, you say finally. Maybe someday. If people remember. If they tell stories. If they don't forget that another way is possible. The fire crackles softly. The children are sleepy now, leaning against each other. Outside, the night is dark and still. Somewhere, an owl calls. Somewhere else, the stream, smaller now, more controlled, but still flowing, continues its patient journey through the valley. You close your eyes. You are tired. So tired. But you have told them. You have passed it on. The memory of the commons. The memory of a world that believes some things should simply be free. Whether they remember it, whether they tell their own grandchildren, is out of your hands now. The fire burns low. The children sleep. And in your mind you walk once more through the old forest, gathering sticks, filling your basket, taking what you need. From a world that once said, "Yes, this is yours, all of ours, freely given." Resistance, when it comes, does not come as revolution. It comes as stubbornness. As memory. As the quiet, persistent refusal to forget. The commons may be enclosed, but the paths through them remain. People still walk the old ways, even when walls have been built across them. They climb over stiles, push through gaps, take the long way around when necessary. The land remembers the paths, and so do the people. Sir Robert's grandson, Sir William now, hires men to block these paths, to fill in the gaps, to post signs threatening prosecution for trespass. But the signs are torn down. The gaps reappear. The paths persist. This is not organized resistance. There are no meetings, no leaders, no manifestos. It is simply the collective, unspoken agreement that some things should not be surrendered without a fight. Even a quiet fight. Even a losing fight. The right to gather fallen wood becomes disputed. Sir William claims that even dead wood belongs to him. The villagers continue to gather it anyway, rising earlier, moving faster, always watching for the foresters. When caught, they plead ignorance. We didn't know. We've always done this. Our parents did this. Sometimes they're fined. Sometimes they're let go with a warning. But they keep gathering. The stream becomes contested. Sir William's grandson, another Robert, confusingly, tries to charge fees for water use. The fees are ignored. People continue to wash clothes, to water animals, to draw drinking water as they always have. When the fee collectors come, people claim poverty. We'll pay next week. We'll pay next month. Next week never comes. This is the resistance of the powerless. Not heroic. Not dramatic. Just persistent. Just human. You are too old now to participate directly. But you watch. And in watching you understand something important. The Commons was never just about resources. It was about a way of being in the world. A way of relating to land and water and each other that didn't reduce everything to property and price. That way of being cannot be completely destroyed by fences and laws. It lives in memory. In habit. In the muscle memory of paths walked for generations. In the collective knowledge of which mushrooms are safe and where the best firewood can be found and how to read the weather and the behavior of birds. Sir William, the current Sir William, great-grandson of the first, is a reasonable man. More reasonable than his grandfather, certainly. He has restored some gleaning rights. Reduced some fees. Acknowledged that certain paths are, in fact, public ways that cannot be legally closed. These are small victories. Tiny reversals in a much larger process of enclosure. But they matter. They matter because they prove that the Commons, once established, is not easily erased. That it leaves marks, in law, in landscape, in the collective memory of communities. You think sometimes about your grandmother. About her warning that they would take everything if they could. She was right. They tried. In many places, they succeeded. But not completely. Not everywhere. Not forever. The stream still flows, and people still use it, even if they're supposed to pay. The forest still stands, diminished but present, and people still walk its paths. The old common pasture is mostly enclosed now, but there are still a few acres that remain open, protected by ancient charters, by legal challenges, by communities that refuse to let them go. These remnants are important. Not because they provide much, they don't, not anymore. But because they prove that another way existed. That the world was not always divided into owners and workers, property and trespass, mine and yours. The Commons was about ours. Communal. Shared. Held in trust for everyone and for the future. That idea has not died. It has been buried, certainly. Obscured. Made to seem naive or impractical or impossibly idealistic. But it has not died. You see evidence of it sometimes. In the way neighbors still help each other without expecting payment. In the way knowledge is shared freely, recipes, remedies, techniques passed from person to person without thought of profit. In the way children play together in the lane, using the space as if it belongs to all of them equally. These are small commons. Informal commons. But they persist. The evening is very quiet now. Your cottage is dark except for the dying fire. Your body aches with age, every joint a complaint, every breath an effort. But your mind is clear. And in your mind you walk once more through the commons of your childhood. Wide and generous. Full of gifts. You gather sticks. You drink from the stream. You glean the fields. And you remember. The end, when it comes, is gentle. You are very old now. Too old to walk far. Too old to gather sticks or glean fields, or even make the journey to the common oven. You sit by your fire, tended by your daughter, fed by what she gathers, and you watch the light change through your window. The village continues without you. Of course it does. Life always continues. The commons, what remains of it, is smaller than ever. Most of the old common lands are now private property, divided and subdivided among various owners. The mill is still a monopoly. The oven requires fees. The forest paths are officially closed, though people still use them when they think they can get away with it. And yet, the world has not ended. People survive. They adapt. They find new ways to meet their needs, new forms of cooperation and mutual aid that don't look exactly like the old commons but serve similar purposes. Your daughter tells you about a group of families who have pooled resources to build a small shared bakehouse in someone's yard. Not legal, exactly. Not approved by the current Sir William. But tolerated. A small commons, recreated in the spaces between official power. You smile at this. It is something. She tells you about a stream, not the old common stream, but a different one, where people have agreed among themselves to share water rights fairly, regardless of what the law says about ownership. Another small commons. Another quiet resistance. These are not the vast, open commons of your grandmother's stories. But they are something. They prove that the instinct toward sharing, toward communal resources, toward saying, ours, instead of mine, that instinct has not been extinguished. Perhaps it cannot be extinguished. Perhaps it is too fundamental to human survival, too deeply woven into our nature as social creatures who depend on each other. The light through your window is very beautiful today. Soft and golden. The kind of light that makes everything seem significant. Sacred even. You think about what you will leave behind. Not property, you have none. Not wealth, you never had any. But something else. Something less tangible but perhaps more valuable. You will leave memory. Stories. The knowledge that another way existed. That people once gathered wood freely, drank from common streams, gleaned common fields. That some things were considered too essential, too sacred, too fundamentally shared to be owned by any individual. This knowledge is a seed. It may lie dormant for a long time, generations even. But seeds are patient. They wait. And when conditions are right, when people grow tired of a world where everything is property and nothing is free, when the cost of privatization becomes unbearable, the seed might grow. Your breathing is slow now. Shallow. Your daughter sits beside you, holding your hand. She is crying, though she tries to hide it. You would comfort her if you had the strength. Instead, you squeeze her hand gently. Outside your window, the village continues. Children play. Someone laughs. A cow lows. The ordinary sounds of ordinary life, unchanged despite everything. And somewhere, you cannot see it from here, but you know it's there, the stream still flows. Smaller than it was. More controlled. But still flowing. Still moving through the landscape, indifferent to ownership, belonging to itself and to the cycle of rain and sea and rain again. Water cannot be truly owned. The medieval world understood this. Eventually, perhaps, the future world will understand it again. You close your eyes. The light behind your eyelids is red and warm. You feel yourself drifting, like a leaf on the surface of that stream. Moving. Floating. Returning to the cycle. Your last thought is not sad. It is this. The commons was never just about land or water or wood. It was about trust. The trust that there would be enough. That the world was generous. That people could be generous too. That not everything needed to be hoarded or owned or protected behind walls. That trust was broken. But trust can be rebuilt. Maybe not in your lifetime. Maybe not in your children's lifetime. But someday. Somehow. The world is full of gift. It always has been. Water and air and sunlight and the wild strawberries that grow in the hedgerows and the kindness between neighbors and the stories passed from grandmother to grandchild. These things cannot be enclosed. Not completely. Not forever. And so you rest. You let go. You become part of the commons yourself, your body returning to earth, your breath joining the air, your story surviving in the memories of those who loved you. The room is very quiet now. The fire crackles softly. And somewhere outside, the stream flows on, eternal and free. Rest now, dear listener. Let these old stories settle around you like a blanket. The world has changed since then, changed in ways those medieval villagers could never have imagined. But some truths remain. We are all part of something larger than ourselves. We are all connected to the land and water and air. And we are all, always, making choices about what we will share and what we will keep, what we will protect for everyone and what we will claim for ourselves. Sleep well. Dream of open fields. Dream of clear streams. Dream of forests where the only rule is need, and kindness is the only law. Tomorrow will come. But for now, rest. The story is told. The commons remembered. And you are free to drift, peacefully, into sleep. Good night.